Shalom, shalom, everyone. It's the Bible Study Dude back for this week's episode, episode 5 of season 3. Let's get right into what to watch for. So, to open this one up, you'll see a disclaimer in the episode as well. There is a very sensitive topic that is covered. We do find out what is bothering Eden. I do not want to give too much away, but for all the ladies out there and any husbands that have gone through a miscarriage, just want to give you a heads up. A couple of our apostles are going to stumble across where Veronica is staying. She's going to ask them for some help. Simon and Gaius start their repairs on the cistern. Pay attention to their conversation. At the end of the last episode, we know that Jairus' daughter is in grave danger. His desperation for her healing leads to an incredible act of faith. Veronica and her desperation to be healed is also going to lead to an incredible act of faith. And then to end this episode, I want you to pay attention to the joy that is going on between the apostles and Veronica herself, compared to the camera's gonna pan to Eden and the pain that she is still feeling. Those are some things to watch out for in episode 5. Once again, if you have not downloaded the Chosen app, what are you waiting for? Please go download the Chosen app. Absolutely free to download, absolutely free to watch all these episodes. Please go enjoy episode 5 and then come right back here for your nerd notes. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed episode 5. I know there were some painful things to get through in that one, but overall, what a great episode. What are some great acts of faith portrayed in that one. So now I want to get into some nerd notes for you. The Hebrew word mekonenot refers to sacred grief workers or professional women mourners in ancient Hebrew tradition. Originating from biblical times, these women were hired to perform elaborate and specific lamentations and wailings at funerals or during times of national tragedy. You can find some of this in scripture from Jeremiah chapter 9, verses 17 through 22. The flutes that were being played. Professional flute players were hired to accompany the wailing women at funerals and contribute to the atmosphere of mourning. The sound of the flute helped express and evoke intense human emotions surrounding death and loss. Today, professional mourners and musical instruments are not part of a standard Orthodox Jewish funeral. The practice has faded out over time as rabbinic authorities increasingly discourage musical instruments at funerals. Modern Jewish funerals focus instead on the eulogies and the communal support of the bereaved family. The grief is still public and structured, but it is expressed through prayer and ritual actions rather than a musical performance with the wailing women. The pantheon of the Greek and Roman gods that was talked about by Gaius. The lowercase word pantheon has a generic meaning that comes from the Greek words pan, meaning all, and theos, meaning God. It can refer to the collective gods of a specific religion or mythology, such as the Greek or Roman pantheon. It can also refer to several different entities, most notably the ancient Roman temple in Rome, known as the Pantheon in Rome. Gaius went through a few of the list of the gods before Simon cut him off, but there are 12 principal Roman deities: Jupiter, Juno, Neptune, Minerva, Mars, Venus, Apollo, Diana, Vulcan, Ceres, Mercury, and Vesta. And then the phrase that Jesus used to raise Jairus' daughter, "Little lamb, arise," a sentimental translation of Jesus' words in the Greek, in the Aramaic, Talitha koum, little girl, get up, or child, arise. While the Aramaic Talitha means girl, some scholars suggest that it may derive from a similar word for a young animal or lamb, leading to its repeated use in popular retellings and sermons. That's all I got for Nerd Notes. Next up will be our post-show discussion where we dive into what we watched in this episode. There's some really good discussion in this one, so without further ado, let's jump right into that. Last episode, we focused a little more on Jairus, so for this one, I want to focus a little bit more on Veronica, the woman who had the condition for 12 years of the bleeding. Veronica is a name we get from Catholic traditions. Veronica is said to be a compassionate woman who offered her veil to Jesus to wipe his face as he carried the cross, and Jesus' face was then imprinted on her cloth. She is recognized as a saint in the Catholic tradition, more for her encounter with Jesus carrying the cross than this encounter where she gets healed. Now, unfortunately, her name was not recorded in Scripture, but through the Catholic tradition and Josephus, we learned that her name was probably Veronica. Now, her parents have disowned her because of her condition. She's unable to worship God in the synagogue because of her condition, and Veronica had to isolate herself and, as you saw, live in a tent out in the wilderness because of her condition. She tried everything that she knew how to do to get better, but nothing has worked for her. The only hope that she had left was to try to come to Capernaum and meet Jesus. Now, because of the testimony of Jesse, Simon Z's brother, that was healed in an earlier episode, she had enough faith to believe that if I can just go to Jesus and touch the fringe of his clothes, I can be healed too. Jesus commends her faith by calling her daughter after she has been disowned by her own family. Now, Veronica responds, "I'm no one's daughter anymore." But Jesus restores her. "Yes, you are." Now, in that time period, if someone who was deemed unclean touched someone who was clean, the clean person would become unclean themselves. Now, in this instance, because it was Jesus, the unclean woman touches the clean Messiah and becomes clean herself. Jesus even defends Veronica when Yusuf questions by stating definitively she is clean. And I love how they say the word exhausted together. Jesus knows your needs. Jesus knows your struggle. Sometimes you just have to fight your way through the crowd. Don't ever stop fighting to get to Jesus. When Veronica washes in the sea, she finally experiences the joy and relief that she had been so desperately seeking. So my question for you is, how did the resolution of the story of Veronica affect you emotionally? What does her quiet act of faith teach us about coming to Jesus with our needs, especially if we feel unworthy or unclean? Why do you think Jesus chose to call her out publicly rather than letting her slip away quiet and anonymously healed. When Jesus tells Veronica, "Your faith has made you well," he is emphasizing personal belief over adherence to the ritual laws. So, how does this challenge the idea that strict adherence to rules and laws is the only path to God? Did this depiction of this story change your view or how you view it in Scripture? What did you like or not like about this scene? Now let's get into the raising of Jairus' daughter. This account can be found in Scripture in 3 out of the 4 books. It can be found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, along with the healing of the bleeding woman. That obviously happens first. Now, in Matthew's account, Jairus claims that his daughter has already died, while in Mark and Luke's accounts, it's recorded that Jairus' daughter is on the verge of death, but has not yet died. The outcome of the story in all 3 Gospels is the same, that Jairus' daughter was raised from the dead. Now, the translation of this verse in Scripture has a couple different meanings. Talitha koum is defined by Mark as meaning, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Other sources and scholars have a different definition of the Aramaic word Talitha, and I did cover that in Nerd Notes. Simon, Big James, and John cannot believe what they just saw. Mouths hanging open. Jairus, who was a synagogue leader, had to put aside his reputation and status to beg Jesus for help. So, what does this reveal about the nature of desperation and what it means to have true faith? Again, I'll ask, did this depiction change how you view this story in Scripture? And again, what did you like or not like about how this scene was covered? Let's talk a little bit about Simon and Eden again. Simon is trying to be a good husband. He wants there to be peace between himself and Eden. He could tell that something's bothering her, something is wrong, but he just can't figure it out. Now, Eden, she's also not expressing her feelings to Simon either, so that is making the tension between them all the more worse. Eden, at the end of the episode, is struggling to understand why Jesus gave Veronica relief from her condition, but she is still in so much pain. She was not helped by Jesus from what happened to her. Has there been a time in your life when you struggled to wonder why someone else's prayers were answered, but yours were not? And to wrap things up here, just some general questions for you. Which scene or interaction in this episode did you find most impactful, and why? How did the conclusion of Veronica's story and the healing of Jairus' daughter redefine what it means to be clean or holy? Jesus heals people who, according to the Jewish law, would have made Jesus ritually unclean to touch a bleeding woman or to touch a corpse. So what statement is Jesus making about his authority over the laws of purity? The episode highlights the difference between being physically clean and being spiritually whole. So how do you see those concepts playing out in your own life or your own community? I want you to consider a situation in your own life where you felt either unclean, forgotten, or perhaps spiritually unwell. What is one small step of faith that you can take this week, like Veronica took, by reaching out for Jesus' garment? What is that one small step you can take in your own walk of faith? Some really good discussion in this one. That's all I've got. If you got anything else for me, let me know in the comments. Next up will be our Bible references from this episode. So the raising of Jairus' daughter and the healing of the bleeding woman can be found in Matthew chapter 9, verses 18 through 26, Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43, and in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 56. When Philip asks Jesus about fasting, and Jesus gives him the answer about fasting, you can find that in Matthew chapter 9, verses 14 and 15, and in Mark chapter 2, verses 18 through 20. The new wine needs to be put in new wineskins can be found Matthew chapter 9, verse 17, and Mark chapter 2, verse 22. Simon's reference to the prophet Jeremiah and the broken cisterns, you can find that in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 2, verse 13. And then, like I mentioned in Nerd Notes, Jeremiah calling for the wailing women can be found in Jeremiah chapter 9, verses 17 through 22. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me for this discussion on episode 5. I'll be back with you next week for episode 6 as we get a little closer to the conclusion of season 3. Hope you've enjoyed. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section. Until then, until episode 6, shalom, shalom, grace and peace. Have a wonderful week.